The second episode of Moon Knight is now streaming on Disney+, which means just like we do every week, we're gonna talk all the spoilers. After becoming Moon Knight, Stephen Grant seeks to find out more about Marc Spector, diving deep and exploring the dangerous truth about who he actually is. But before I properly start with my review for Moon Knight, I want you to start a conversation in the comments below. We talk Moon Knight every week. There's a spoiler review for episode 1, there's a spoiler-free review for the first 4 episodes that I was able to see early, and I want you to drop your theories after seeing this episode for the next episode so you can be featured in next week's review. So go ahead and start it down there. And if you like movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies, TV, and Moon Knight. I am very much into this show right now, where it feels like every episode is offering us something different. In this, that is Marvel's first true dive into horror, we're thrown into this puzzle piece mystery box that we have to unravel slowly with our character. And with that drastic change to the status quo at the end of last week's episode, now Stephen's life feels even more chaotic. Where last week we only followed him as he realized he has these missing pieces of information, with the whole beating up a bunch of guys and waking up in places where he wasn't before, and eventually finding out what that is by allowing control of his body to the other person and becoming Moon Knight. And that right now is the best aspect of this show for me. There is a choice every time he becomes the character we want to see. There's something about letting go and rescinding control, and how becoming more powerful is how the show explores his vulnerability with the ID. That's extremely interesting. That's something I have never seen anywhere before besides reading Moon Knight comics. And so this episode focuses a lot on the duality of Stephen Grant and Marc Spector. Again, while last week we focused merely on Stephen and we had glimpses of Khonshu, of Marc Spector, kind of meeting him at the end, now we start to really see the difference between these two, and even in the way Oscar Isaac plays him. When Stephen goes to check the surveillance footage after the news is covering what happened at the museum with the bathroom all destroyed and whatnot, and he even has conversations with Marc about it that we'll talk about. And when he checks the surveillance footage, it doesn't see the jackal that Harrow threw at Stephen. It doesn't see what happened in the bathroom. It just sees Oscar Isaac switching in the kind of performance that he's giving. We only see glimpses early on as he shows up in the surveillance footage, looks directly at the camera. But also, as we start to see what Marc Spector is capable of, we also see how it continues to tear Stephen's life apart. He's fired. He's given the card to go to a doctor to help in his vulnerability with his mental condition. And we start to see Stephen getting a little bit more gusto. He goes back to talk to the statue man, the homeless man in the middle of the square, even hugs him at one point. And it just continues to show how likable this character is, even with the whole calls to his mom that never calls back. There's this theory that Marc himself is putting the postcards on the fridge and whatnot. And that's just really nice. I can't talk too much about that yet because it's about a conversation that happens in the next few episodes, but we'll get to that. And so we start to put more pieces together. We see how Stephen is such a likable guy, such a nice guy, but he starts to get a little bit more gusto. He doesn't just sit back, relax, accept what is happening to him. He goes and explores and finds the locker place, the storage warehouse, where he finds the storage room of Marc Spector with all his identities, and we have this really cool conversation between Stephen and the reflection. And what I really like here is that Marc is also not someone who chose this willingly. Marc is not someone who accepted to be the avatar of Khonshu. There's something at stake for him as well. It's not only a choice for Steven, it's not only dangerous for Steven, it's not only a vulnerability for him, for Marc as well. So we're putting not just one of these characters, but both of these characters, these personalities, playing a very dangerous game where they both have something to lose and something to win with this. And in a nice contrast to last week, where we follow Steven's life and start to see little by little Marc intercepting and coming into his life abruptly, almost interrupting the flow of Steven's life, in this episode we start to see Steven being inserted more into Marc's life, where after the phone call and all that, Layla has come to London. Calamawy is just really great in this show, where she's giving us a ton of pieces of the puzzle, giving us a ton of clues into what is actually going on, into what Marc himself is hiding, but all talking to Steven. And it just leads to this really nice conversation that has its funny moments, but you also start to realize that, holy shit, Marc's life is also kind of really sad. Where this guy can't have a full life because of the danger that his wife faces if he stays with her, because of the whole being the avatar Khonshu thing. But this whole conversation as she finds him after he runs away from the lockers in that incredible sequence where Khonshu goes after him and he looks like a madman running around in the halls, and it's horrifying. Again, just really, really well done. And the show does this really neat trick where, because of Layla's appearance and the words she's spouting out because of the whole divorce thing, it kind of reinforces the notion that Steven has about Marc already. So it makes things more complicated, particularly even when the police comes in and they take him, they start to explore him because they find Marc's ID and they think he is Marc. And again, everything they find out, and the more information we ourselves as an audience find out about Marc Spector, just makes him look worse and makes Steven not trust him. And one of the things I should have totally called when first watching this episode was that these policemen were members of the cult of Ammit and were working for Harrow. And what the show does so interestingly here is that when they bring him to Harrow, Harrow is not trying the same strategy again. He's exploiting Marc/Steven's vulnerability, where he hears Steven talking to, in Harrow's perspective, nothing, but he starts to understand what it is. And it's here that we find out that he's a former avatar of Khonshu. He knows what Steven is going through. He almost predicts the things that Khonshu is saying, even though he doesn't see him anymore, he doesn't hear him anymore. Every time Steve looks around and he's looking at Khonshu, Harrow knows what is going on. And that is very interesting. To have the villain one step ahead of the hero in a philosophical aspect, where the whole things that they discuss about stopping a crime from happening, stopping a sin from happening, stopping people from doing bad things before they do it. It's the whole Minority Report discussion again, where they had this division for pre-crimes, to stop someone from committing a crime before they did it. And that is all very rich. Thematically, it connects a lot to a show where Steven and Marc Spector are very morally gray characters, even though Steven is not one to blame for that. That's why Ammit's judgment couldn't make a decision on him, because he's not a bad guy, but Marc is not a good guy. And I like how Marc is very aware of that. I like how Khonshu is very aware of that, and that is why he chose Marc. Where Marc himself, the personality of Marc Spector, feels very similar to who Arthur Harrow is. Arthur Harrow being this guy who preaches peace and is internally holding out on a lot of rage, on a lot of seething resentment. And Marc Spector is just a guy who throws that out. And he tries to appeal to Steven through that, because he has this whole community, they all hang around and they make you feel at peace just for a sec. until Steven continues to say no because he doesn't know where the scarab is, and Layla eventually comes to help him, which I'm not sure what the strategy was there. I get that she's still very doubtful, that she doesn't understand what is actually going on with Steven/Marc. She still believes this is Marc pretending or something, but I'm not sure what the strategy was there. And so Harrow launches another jackal, and we have the debut, ladies and gentlemen, of Mr. Knight, where Steven wants to protect himself. He wants to use the powers, but he doesn't want to give the body to Marc. And so as they're falling down after being attacked by the jackal, which only he sees, which is very interesting. Layla doesn't see it. We're not aware if anyone else sees it, even if Harrow sees it, but Steven is the only one that sees it. He doesn't want to give the body back, so as they're falling, he transforms into Mr. Knight. He activates, per se, the powers, and so he unlocks the powers for himself, not just for the other personality. And I love seeing Mr. Knight on screen. As someone who loves this character, read the runs, particularly the Warren Ellis, Lemire, and Smallwood, where in 2014 Mr. Knight first debuted. Love seeing this. I like the change, in a sense, where now it's Steven who, holding the power of Khonshu, becomes Mr. Knight. It creates this very interesting dichotomy between him and Marc, where one is this brutal, hard-edged warrior, and the other is more of this elegant gentleman, still holding the power of Khonshu. It just shows in a visual way the difference between these two personalities, these two characters, essentially. As someone who's read the comics, though, I don't think it's particularly interesting. I don't think it makes it particularly compelling, and it kind of shows their hand in not exploring fully the difference between Moon Knight and Mr. Knight. Because in the comics, Mr. Knight is a completely different character from Steven, from Marc, from Moon Knight. They're simplifying it in the sense that works and works for the story. There is a part of me that is still very conflicted about this change, even though it works for this version of the character. And as Steven tries his best to take care of the jackal, he can't do it, so he ends up giving away the body to Marc. And this time, we do see Moon Knight in action. And it's awesome. It feels brutal, and it feels exciting with him running around, taking care of the jackal, going through the rooftops and not all vigilante style. This latter part of the episode is fantastic. I love finally seeing Moon Knight on screen because it feels like a payoff. A payoff that was set up in the ending of the last episode, and we were building up to it all along throughout this second episode. He becomes Moon Knight, he takes care of the jackal, it feels like this great victory, but then two things are lost. As much as we have this moment of elation, now Steven cannot get the body back. Marc is taking over, and Marc has decided to stay in control to keep on with his mission under the threat of Khonshu. And the moment when Moon Knight kills the jackal, and we have our first moment with Marc in control, and he has this conversation with Steven in the mirror, pleading for his body back, and Marc doesn't give it. It's heartbreaking, and the episode does such a great job at positioning us against Marc Spector and siding with Steven. You feel that impact, you feel that weight of something doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. And it's going to take a very different direction now that this guy is in control. And that whole conversation with Khonshu, that is just really great. But again, continues to explore these rich philosophical themes of belief, and we explore more of Marc's conflict, wanting to be Moon Knight, wanting to be in control so he can finish this mission, which is supposedly his agreement with Khonshu. And we end up going to Egypt because the scarab was lost. Amidst all the confusion of Steven not wanting to give the body to Marc, the scarab was left at Harrow's base, and now he has the scarab. and now he can go to Egypt and find the tomb of Ammit. And so with this small victory, we had two things that were lost, and now the status quo of the show again keeps changing. I really like this episode. I think it's a very solid, consistent, perfectly fitting continuation to what we set up in the last episode. And again, by the end, things are different. Stakes are raised, the status quo is drastically changed, leading into episode 3, which is a great episode. It might just be my favorite. Moon Knight episode 2 focuses more on the duality and relationship between Steven and Marc Spector. It gives us our first full-on glorious Moon Knight appearance on screen, and we dive deeper into Marc as a character as well, exploring his damaged relationship with his wife, his conflicted relationship with Khonshu, and we start to spread more scenes about what makes this character so excitingly complex and intriguing. It continues to be this globe-trotting adventure that now it's expanding with the characters going to Egypt, of course, but it continues with that veil of mystery and darkness that continues to distinguish this character from any other that we've seen before. But I want you to let me know your thoughts on episode 2 of Moon Knight. Did you like Mr. Knight's debut? Do you want to see a different version of that character? What was your favorite part of this episode, your least favorite, and all your theories down there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining me every week if you do, and I'll be back, of course, next week to talk more Moon Knight. Remember that there's a spoiler review for last week's episode, a spoiler-free review for the first 4 episodes, and my review of The Secrets of Dumbledore, spoiler-free, is now up on the channel, and I'll be back very soon with more videos and of course Moon Knight next week. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.